They say money can't buy happiness. Elizabeth Crawford had spent 22 years proving that theory wrong, building a $3.1 billion empire on the foundation of her parents' deaths, collecting masterpieces the way other people collected regrets. She'd believed wealth could purchase everything worth having: security, influence, the illusion of control over a world that had taken her mother and father in a fireball 30,000 feet above the Atlantic when she was 19 years old. Then a man pulled her from a burning car and walked away without leaving his name, and everything she thought she knew about value shattered like the windshield of her Bentley against an oak tree on Route 29. This is the story of how she learned the difference between price and worth. The October morning started the way most of Beth's mornings started, alone. She'd driven from Manhattan before dawn, the kind of predatory early hour when the highways belonged to truckers and people running from something. The Berkshire estate sale wouldn't begin until 10, but she'd wanted the quiet, the space to think without her phone vibrating with demands from the board, from Thomas Bradford, her CFO, from Catherine Walsh, her senior advisor, who kept asking pointed questions about when Beth planned to start living instead of just accumulating. The Bentley's engine hummed with the mechanical perfection that only $150,000 could buy. Leather seats the color of cream, dashboard displays that glowed soft blue in the darkness. Every surface designed to whisper the same message: you have arrived. You are safe. You are in control. Beth had believed all of it. Route 29 cut through Pennsylvania farmland, where morning mist clung to cornfields like ghosts refusing to leave. The GPS estimated arrival at 9:15. She'd have 45 minutes to walk through the collection before the vultures descended. Other collectors, museum buyers, people who measured beauty in auction estimates and provenance documents. The estate belonged to a recently deceased industrialist whose taste ran toward impressionist landscapes. Beth had her eye on a Monet, a small piece but authenticated, worth perhaps $4 million at auction. She'd pay $5 if necessary. Money was just a tool for acquiring what she wanted, and she always got what she wanted. The deer appeared from nowhere. One moment the road stretched empty and gray in her headlights. The next, a doe stood frozen in the center lane, eyes reflecting back at Beth like coins catching light. Time compressed. Beth's hands yanked the wheel left. The Bentley responded with German engineering precision, but physics didn't care about precision. The rear tires lost traction. The car spun 90 degrees and kept spinning. Treeline rushed toward her. Beth had one crystal-clear thought. This is how Mom and Dad felt. Then the oak tree introduced itself to the driver's side door. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. The airbag punched Beth in the face hard enough to split her lip. Her head snapped sideways into the window frame. Something warm ran down her temple, blood or tears she couldn't tell. The car lurched to a stop at an angle that made her inner ear scream wrongness. Steam hissed from the hood. Worse than steam. Smoke. And underneath both, a smell that made Beth's hindbrain shriek danger. Gasoline. She tried the door handle. It didn't move. Tried again, putting her shoulder into it. The frame had compressed on impact, metal fusing to metal in ways Detroit engineers never intended. The handle turned, but the door stayed shut, and now the smoke was getting thicker, and Beth's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't work the seatbelt release. This is it, she thought. 41 years old, $3 billion, about to burn alive in a car worth more than most people's houses, and no one will even know I'm gone until the board meeting tomorrow. Her vision grayed at the edges. She couldn't tell if she was losing consciousness or if the smoke was just that thick. Her head throbbed where it had hit the window. Her ribs screamed every time she breathed. The seatbelt wouldn't release. The door wouldn't open. Fire was coming, and she was trapped and alone and... Hands grabbed the door handle from outside. Beth's eyes focused enough to see movement through the spider-webbed glass. A figure. Male, dark skin, muscular shoulders straining as he pulled at the door. His mouth moved, but she couldn't hear words through the ringing in her ears. The door didn't budge. The man stepped back, seemed to assess the situation with the kind of calm that made no sense given the circumstances. Then he grabbed the handle again, planted one boot against the rocker panel, and pulled with everything he had. Beth watched his face through broken glass. Concentration, determination, not panic, not fear, just focused intent. The look of someone solving a mechanical problem that happened to have a human life attached to it. Tendons stood out in his neck. His whole body became a lever, using the car itself as a fulcrum. Metal shrieked. The top hinge snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The bottom followed. The door came free, and the man hurled it aside like it weighed nothing at all. And then strong hands were reaching for her, unfastening the seatbelt her shaking fingers couldn't manage. "You're going to be okay." The voice cut through the ringing in her ears. Deep, calm, the kind of voice that didn't make promises it couldn't keep. Beth tried to focus on his face, but her vision kept swimming. Dark eyes, maybe 35, grease stains on his hands. He slid one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her out of the car in one smooth motion. He carried her across grass still wet with morning dew, putting distance between Beth and the Bentley's ruptured fuel line. 30 feet. 40. Enough that when the electrical system finally sparked and the gasoline ignited, they'd have a chance. He set her down on soft ground with unexpected gentleness, like he'd done this before. Like saving strangers was just another item on his morning to-do list. Beth's eyes fluttered open. Blue sky, October clouds. The man's face blocking out the sun as he leaned over her, checking her pulse with fingers that knew what they were looking for. "Who?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. Nobody important. He was already pulling off his jacket, a worn brown Carhartt that had seen better years. He folded it carefully and placed it under her head, stabilizing her neck. "Just rest. Help's coming." Her eyes searched his face, trying to memorize features her concussed brain couldn't quite hold on to. Strong jaw, tired eyes that had seen loss, hands that were gentle despite their calluses. She wanted to ask his name again, but her vision was graying out, consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was a child's voice, young and scared. "Dad, is she going to be okay?" "She's breathing. That's what matters. Now flag down the next car for 911. Dad. He had a son. This man who'd ripped a car door off its hinges and carried her to safety like she weighed nothing, had a child watching the whole thing. And Beth's last thought before unconsciousness claimed her completely was absurd and crystalline. "I hope the boy isn't traumatized." Marcus Wright set the woman down on grass 40 feet from the Bentley and forced himself to stop shaking. 20 years as a mechanic meant he knew exactly how close that had been. Ruptured fuel line, electrical system still live. Maybe 60 seconds before the whole thing went up like a Roman candle. His hands were steadier than they had any right to be, checking her pulse, her breathing, looking for arterial bleeding or signs of spinal injury. She was breathing, pulse thready but present, bleeding from a gash above her left eyebrow, but nothing that screamed immediate death. Blonde hair matted with blood, designer suit in charcoal gray, now ruined. Diamond earrings that probably cost more than his truck. One black heel still on her right foot, the left lost somewhere in the wreckage. Rich, Marcus thought. Very rich. The kind of rich that drove German luxury cars and wore suits that cost 4 figures. The kind of rich that didn't usually end up on rural Pennsylvania highways at 6:47 in the morning. But bleeding was bleeding, and broken was broken, and Marcus had learned a long time ago that money didn't make you special when death came calling. Jordan stood 10 feet away, frozen, his 8-year-old face pale with shock. Marcus had told him to stay in the truck, but of course the boy hadn't listened. Hadn't listened any more than Marcus would have at that age when faced with something bigger than himself. "Go flag down the next car. Tell them to call 911. Jordan ran. Good kid. Scared, but doing what needed doing anyway. Maya would have been proud. Marcus turned back to the woman. Her eyes had closed again. Shock, probably. Maybe a concussion. He couldn't do much beyond what he'd already done. Get her clear, stabilize her head, make sure she kept breathing. First responders could handle the rest. His job was done. Except his jacket was under her head, and the morning was colder than he'd realized, and sitting there on damp grass, watching a stranger breathe, seemed like the least he could do, given he'd just pulled her from a car that might explode any second. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called it in. Good. Marcus stood, brushed grass from his jeans, and headed back toward his truck. He'd give the paramedics the basic facts. Found her unconscious, fuel line ruptured, got her clear, and then he'd take Jordan to school and try to explain to an 8-year-old why sometimes good things happened to bad situations. The ambulance screamed into view, lights strobing red and white against pale sky. 2 paramedics hit the ground running. Marcus gave them the 30-second version. Impact, unconscious, ruptured fuel, got her out. One of them jogged over while the other started an IV line. "Sir, that was incredibly brave. That fuel line, the whole thing could have gone up." Marcus shrugged. It wasn't bravery. It was just seeing a problem and fixing it. Same as rebuilding a carburetor or diagnosing a bad transmission. You assessed the situation, identified the solution, executed. Thinking about it too much just wasted time. "She going to be okay?" "Vitals are stable. We'll transport to County General, run a full workup."
The paramedic pulled out a notepad.
"Can I get your name for the report?"
Marcus was already walking back to his truck. Jordan sat in the passenger seat, buckled in, his sketchbook open on his lap. The boy looked up as Marcus opened the driver's door.
Sir, we really should get your information."
The diesel engine coughed to life. Marcus pulled a 3-point turn and headed back toward Route 29, leaving the paramedics and their questions and the blonde woman in the designer suit behind. He had a garage to open and a son to get to school and a day's work waiting. He didn't need thanks, didn't need his name in some official report, didn't need to get tangled up in whatever mess that woman's life was about to become. What he wouldn't notice until hours later when Jordan came home from school in tears, was the empty pocket in his jacket where Maya's pencil should have been.
The worn wooden pencil his wife had used for all her best watercolors. The pencil Jordan now used for his drawings. The last physical piece of his mother he could hold in his hands. It had been in Marcus's jacket pocket this morning when he'd folded that jacket under a stranger's head. And now it was gone. 3 miles down the road, Jordan finally spoke. "Dad?" "Yeah, son." "Why didn't you tell them your name?" Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. How did you explain to an 8-year-old that giving your name meant questions, meant paperwork, meant getting pulled into someone else's crisis when you had enough crisis of your own? How did you explain that the moment you accepted gratitude, you made the situation about yourself instead of about the person who needed help? Because that's not why we stopped. Jordan was quiet for a moment, his pencil moving across the sketchbook page in strokes Marcus couldn't see from the driver's seat. "Mom would have stayed." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His hands clenched on the wheel hard enough that his knuckles went white. "What?" "Mom would have stayed until she knew the lady was okay. She would have gone to the hospital. She would have—" "Jordan." The name came out sharper than Marcus intended, harder. The boy went silent, face turning toward the window, jaw tight in that way that meant he was fighting tears. Silence filled the cab. Heavy, uncomfortable. Marcus's chest ached. The boy was right. Maya would have stayed. Maya would have held the woman's hand in the ambulance, would have waited in the hospital lobby until some doctor confirmed the stranger would survive. That was who Maya had been, all heart, all compassion, unable to walk away from anyone's pain even when it wasn't hers to carry. But Maya was dead. Had been dead for 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days. And Marcus was still here, still trying to figure out how to be both mother and father to a boy who saw too much and understood too little. "I'm sorry." His voice came out rough. "I didn't mean to snap." "It's fine." Jordan's voice was small, tight, the voice that meant it definitely wasn't fine. "It's not fine. That was wrong of me." Marcus pulled into the Lincoln Elementary parking lot, found a spot near the entrance, killed the engine, turned to face his son. "Your mother would be proud of you today. The way you ran for help, the way you didn't panic. That was brave." Jordan didn't turn around. His voice came out quiet, barely audible over the sounds of other cars pulling in, other parents dropping off other children who hadn't watched their fathers rip car doors off hinges before breakfast. "Would she be proud of you, too?" Then he was gone, grabbing his backpack and disappearing through the school's front doors before Marcus could answer. Marcus sat in the parking lot for a long time after Jordan disappeared inside. The truck engine ticked as it cooled. Other parents pulled in and out around him, caught up in their own morning routines, their own small dramas. Would she be proud of you too? The question sat in his chest like a stone. 2 years and 3 months ago, Maya Porter Wright had been the center of everything, the reason he got up in the morning, the voice that talked him through hard days, the woman who'd believed in him when nobody else did, not even himself. They'd met in high school, chemistry class, back when Marcus was a junior with no plan and no prospects. Maya had sat behind him and spent the whole semester drawing pictures on his back with her finger when Mrs. Crawford wasn't looking. Hearts, mostly. Sometimes flowers. Once she'd written her phone number, digit by digit, class period after class period, until Marcus finally figured out she wasn't just being weird. He'd called that night, hands shaking so bad he could barely dial. She'd answered on the first ring, told him she'd been waiting by the phone for 2 hours. That was Maya. She knew what she wanted and went after it. Marcus had just been lucky enough to be what she wanted. 21 when they married, 26 when Jordan arrived, built a life in Riverside, Pennsylvania, population 4,200, 2 stoplights, 1 high school, the kind of town where everybody knew everybody and the biggest excitement was Friday night football. Marcus had opened Wright Auto Repair in a bay he rented from Ed Morrison. Maya had worked part-time at the library and painted on weekends, watercolors mostly, landscapes and portraits she never tried to sell because she said art wasn't about money. Then cancer came. Quietly at first, a cough that wouldn't quit, fatigue that sleep couldn't fix. By the time they found it, the disease had colonized her lungs, set up operations in her lymph nodes, started sending scouts to her bones. Stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 8. Those final weeks, when Maya could barely lift her head off the pillow, when every breath was a battle she was slowly losing, she'd made Marcus promise 3 things. First, take care of Jordan. Give him everything he needs to become the man he's supposed to be. Second, don't let grief make you hard. Stay soft. Stay open. The world will try to close you off, but don't let it. Third, find love again. Not right away, but someday. Don't spend your life alone just because I had to leave it. Marcus had kept the first promise, was failing at the second. The third felt impossible. His phone buzzed. Eleanor Murphy, the widow next door who'd been Maya's best friend since they moved to Riverside. Saw you leave early. Everything okay? He typed back, "Long morning. All good." Her response came immediately. "Casserole in your fridge when you get home." Marcus pocketed the phone and started the truck. He had a garage to open and brake pads to replace and an engine to rebuild. Work. Honest work. The kind that kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. What he wouldn't know for weeks yet, was that 300 miles away in Manhattan, a woman was waking up in a hospital bed, asking questions no one could answer, holding a wooden pencil that would change everything. Beth Crawford opened her eyes to white ceiling tiles and the smell of antiseptic. For one disorienting moment, she thought she might be dead. Then pain hit, sharp across her ribs, throbbing behind her eyes, a deep ache in her left shoulder, and she knew she was very much alive. "Miss Crawford?" A nurse appeared beside the bed. Young, maybe 25, nervous in a way that meant she knew exactly who her patient was. Elizabeth Crawford didn't end up in regular hospital beds. Elizabeth Crawford had private suites and personal physicians, and the kind of resources that turned medical crises into minor inconveniences. "You're at Manhattan Presbyterian. You were in a car accident. Do you remember what happened?" Beth tried to speak. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed ground glass. The nurse offered water through a straw. 3 small sips, and the memory surfaced slowly, like something dredged up from deep water. Route 29. The Berkshire estate. A deer in the road. Her hands on the wheel. The oak tree rushing toward her. Then hands. Strong hands pulling her from the wreckage. A voice telling her she'd be okay. "Someone saved me." Her voice came out as a croak. The nurse nodded. "Yes, a good Samaritan. The paramedics said you wouldn't have survived if you hadn't acted so quickly. The fuel line was ruptured. It could have exploded any moment." The words didn't make sense. Beth had been alone on that highway. Alone the way she was always alone. The way she'd been alone for 22 years, since the night 2 flight attendants knocked on her dorm room door at Princeton to tell her that her parents' Gulfstream had experienced catastrophic mechanical failure over the Atlantic. Who was he? The nurse hesitated. That pause told Beth everything before the words came. No one got his name. He left before anyone could properly thank him. Beth stared at her. He left? Yes, ma'am. Without saying who he was? That's correct. The room tilted slightly. Beth closed her eyes, tried to process what she was hearing. Someone had pulled her from a burning car, saved her life, and then disappeared without leaving a name, without asking for anything, without even waiting to see if she'd survive. It didn't make sense. Nothing in Beth's 41 years of experience made sense of that kind of behavior. Everyone wanted something. Every relationship was transactional. Every kindness came with an invoice, whether explicit or implied. She'd learned to see through people so completely that genuine connection had become impossible. Could spot a social climber at 50 paces. Could smell a gold digger from across a room. Could identify a fortune hunter before they opened their mouth. And now someone had saved her life and walked away without even leaving a name. There must be something. Beth's voice gained strength. A description? A license plate? Something. The nurse checked her chart. The paramedic report says he was a black man, mid-30s, drove an old pickup truck. Had a young boy with him. That's all they noted. A black man, mid-30s, old pickup truck, young boy. Beth filed the details away in the part of her mind that cataloged everything worth remembering. She built a $3 billion empire on her ability to find what others couldn't see, to acquire what others thought untouchable. If this man thought he could save her life and disappear, he'd underestimated exactly who he'd pulled from that Bentley. I need my phone. Miss Crawford, you really should rest. Phone, now. The nurse handed over Beth's cell, recovered from the wreckage. Screen cracked but functional. Beth scrolled to a number she rarely used, a man who found people who didn't want to be found. She'd hired Graham Pierce twice before, once to track down a seller trying to back out of a Rothko sale, once to locate a forger who tried to pass off a fake Vermeer. Graham was expensive, discreet, and very good at his job. He answered on the third ring, voice groggy like she'd woken him. She probably had. It was barely 8 in the morning. "I need you to find someone for me." "Who?" Graham's voice sharpened, sleep falling away. He knew that tone. Beth only used that tone when she was about to spend serious money. "I don't know his name. I don't know where he lives. All I know is he saved my life 3 hours ago and then vanished." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's not much to go on." "I'm aware. That's why I'm calling you." More silence. Graham was calculating, running numbers in his head. Finally, "What's this worth to you?" Beth looked at the ceiling, thought about strong hands and a calm voice, and kindness that expected nothing in return. Thought about 22 years of people who wanted her money, her connections, her name on their projects. Thought about what it might mean if somewhere in the world there existed a person who'd risked death for her and asked for nothing. "Whatever it takes. I need to know who he is." 3 weeks later, Graham Pierce delivered. The dossier arrived by courier to Beth's penthouse office. Leather-bound, embossed with Graham's discreet logo, the kind of presentation that justified his 6-figure fee. Beth dismissed her assistant, locked the door, and opened it alone. Subject: Marcus Wright, age 34, African-American male, widowed. Wife: Rachel Wright, née Porter, deceased 2 years prior, lung cancer, 8-month decline from diagnosis to death. One son, Jordan Wright, age 8, 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, Riverside, Pennsylvania. Residence: 247 Maple Street, Riverside, Pennsylvania. Single-family home, purchased 2015. Current estimated value, $87,000. Employment: owner/operator, Wright Auto Repair, 14 Industrial Way, Riverside, Pennsylvania. Sole proprietorship. Annual gross revenue approximately $41,000. Credit score, 687. No outstanding debts beyond mortgage. No criminal record. No civil judgments. No red flags. Graham had included photographs. Surveillance shots, grainy but clear enough. Marcus bent over an open car hood, hands dark with grease, face focused in concentration. Jordan sitting nearby on an overturned crate with a sketchbook, drawing something Beth couldn't see. A small house with peeling paint and a tidy yard. A garage with a hand-painted sign. Wright Auto Repair. Honest work at honest prices. A life that fit in a single frame. Beth stared at those photos for hours. $41,000 a year. She spent more than that on a single painting. More than that on a weekend trip to the Hamptons. More than that on clothes she wore once and forgot about. This man worked 16-hour days to provide for his son. Lived in a house worth less than her car. Made sacrifices she couldn't even imagine. And he'd saved her life without expecting anything in return. The next photograph in Graham's file stopped her cold. Close-up of a wooden pencil, worn smooth from years of use. Teeth marks at the top where someone had chewed while thinking. Paint rubbed away in patches from being gripped and re-gripped 1,000 times. The eraser nearly gone, just a thin disc of pink rubber clinging to the metal ferrule. Graham's note was clipped to the photo. Pencil belonged to Rachel Wright. She used it for her artwork, primarily watercolor paintings and sketches. Their son Jordan now uses it for his drawings. Appears to be treasured family heirloom. Based on witness statements and timeline analysis, subject Marcus left his jacket at the accident scene to stabilize your neck. Pencil was in jacket pocket. Current whereabouts, unknown, presumed lost. Beth's hands trembled. She'd taken something precious from them. Not on purpose, not with malice, but she'd taken it all the same. This pencil wasn't just wood and graphite. It was connection, memory, love. A dead mother's legacy to her son. And it was sitting in Beth's personal effects bag from the hospital because a man had been too busy saving her life to remember what was in his pockets. The intercom buzzed. Her assistant's voice. "Miss Crawford, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes. The board. Right. She was the CEO of Crawford Art Holdings, a conglomerate that specialized in art acquisitions and gallery management. She had responsibilities, quarterly reports to review, merger proposals to evaluate, a company to run. But she couldn't stop looking at the photograph of Marcus Wright with his hands buried in an engine, his son drawing nearby. The two of them existing in a world so far removed from hers, they might as well be on different planets. "Tell them I'm not feeling well. Reschedule for next week." "Miss Crawford, they've been waiting 3 weeks already. Cancel it." Beth hung up before her assistant could argue. She picked up the pencil from her desk, the pencil she'd kept since the hospital, unable to throw it away, unable to return it, unable to explain, even to herself, why this simple wooden object felt more valuable than all the masterpieces hanging on her office walls. She should mail it back. Anonymous package. No return address. Let them have their heirloom back and walk away from this whole situation. But then she'd lose her reason to meet him, and she needed to meet him, needed to understand him, needed to know what kind of man saved a stranger's life and wanted nothing in return. The pencil would be her excuse, her way in, her justification for showing up in his life with questions she had no right to ask. Except that made her manipulative, made her exactly the kind of person she'd spent 22 years becoming, someone who used other people's vulnerabilities as leverage, someone who saw everything as transactional, someone who turned genuine human connection into strategy. Beth looked at Graham's photos again. Marcus under the hood of a car, Jordan with his sketchbook. A small house full of love and loss and resilience. These were real people with real lives, real pain. And she was about to insert herself into their world using a family heirloom as bait. But what choice did she have? If she showed up as Elizabeth Crawford, Billionaire CEO, everything would change. Marcus would see dollar signs instead of her. Jordan would see opportunity instead of connection. The whole town would see a story for the newspapers, a curiosity, a mismatch. She'd never get the truth, never understand what made Marcus different from everyone else she'd ever met. The lie was necessary. That's what she told herself. The lie was the only way to find something real. 6 weeks later, Beth Crawford became someone else entirely. The Honda Civic pulled into Riverside on a Tuesday morning when October's chill had settled into the hollows between buildings. Sarah Bennett, the woman who used to be Elizabeth Crawford, gripped the steering wheel hard enough that her knuckles blanched white. 6 weeks of preparation had brought her to this moment. 6 weeks of learning to walk without boardroom confidence, to speak without commanding every room, to exist as someone ordinary instead of someone worth $3 billion. The rented apartment sat an hour north, furnished with IKEA pieces that cost less than the throw pillows in her Manhattan penthouse. Her closet held Goodwill finds and Target basics. Her makeup routine had simplified to drugstore mascara and chapstick. She'd practiced her backstory until it felt natural. Art consultant, burned out from the New York grind, taking time to figure out what she really wanted. Close enough to truth to avoid obvious lies, vague enough to dodge fact-checking. Wright Auto Repair materialized on Industrial Way exactly where Graham's dossier had promised. Weathered wood siding, hand-painted sign promising honest work at honest prices. A converted barn that had probably housed tractors before Marcus Wright turned it into his livelihood. Sarah's pulse hammered in her throat. This was insane. She was a CEO playing dress-up, a billionaire pretending poverty, a woman who'd spent 6 weeks learning to lie convincingly so she could find something true. She almost put the Civic in reverse and drove away. Then Jordan looked up from his sketchbook. The boy sat on an overturned crate near the open garage door, completely absorbed in whatever he was drawing. 8 years old. Dark eyes that belonged to his dead mother. The same focused intensity Sarah had seen in Graham's surveillance photos, except now it was real, immediate, three-dimensional. A child who'd lost his mother at 6 and was trying to draw his way through grief, one sketch at a time. "You need help?" Sarah's voice caught in her throat. Jordan's pencil, cheap yellow Dixon, not the treasured wooden one currently burning a hole in Sarah's jacket pocket, paused mid-stroke. "My car's making a grinding noise when I brake." Movement from inside the garage. A creeper rolled out from under a Ford pickup, revealing Marcus Wright in the flesh instead of in photographs. Sarah forgot how to breathe. Surveillance images hadn't captured the quiet strength in his shoulders, earned from 2 decades of physical labor, hadn't shown the kindness in his eyes that somehow coexisted with bone-deep weariness, hadn't conveyed the way he looked at her without calculation, without trying to assess what she could do for him, without any of the predatory evaluation she'd learned to expect from every man who learned her net worth. He stood, wiping grease-dark hands on a rag already saturated with oil. "Afternoon? What seems to be the problem?" Sarah's rehearsed explanation nearly died in her throat. She forced words out. "Grinding sound. When I brake. Not sure what it is." Marcus walked to the Civic, movements economical, no wasted motion. Popped the hood without asking permission, leaned in, listening with the focused attention of a diagnostician who'd spent 20 years learning to hear what engines were trying to say. Asked her to start it. Asked her to press the brake. Nodded to himself like he was having a private conversation with the machine. "Brake pads are worn down. Not dangerous yet, but you'll want to replace them soon." He straightened, met her eyes directly. "Parts and labor probably $65, $70. Depends what I find when I get in there." Sarah blinked. $65. In Manhattan, she'd paid $300 to have her Bentley's brake pads replaced, and that had been with a corporate discount. She'd expected gouging, the small-town mechanic tax, the "we can tell you're not from here" markup. "That's very reasonable." Marcus shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "I charge fair prices. People around here work hard for their money. Don't feel right taking more than a job's worth." Something twisted in Sarah's chest. Here was a man who could exploit ignorance, could pad bills with unnecessary services, could charge double and get away with it. Instead, he chose fairness, like it was the only option that made sense. Like integrity was just how you conducted business instead of a competitive disadvantage. The brake job took 45 minutes. Sarah spent them in Marcus's office, a converted corner of the garage filled with children's drawings taped to every available surface, all signed Jordan W. in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Landscapes, portraits, abstract compositions that showed surprising sophistication. One drawing made Sarah's throat close up. A family under a tree. Father, mother, son. Except the mother floated slightly above the ground like an angel, her feet not quite touching earth. Jordan appeared with terrible coffee in a chipped mug. "Dad makes awful coffee, but it's free." Sarah laughed. The sound surprised her with its genuineness. "I appreciate the honesty. Mom always said honesty was the most important thing, even when it's hard." His face flickered with something Sarah couldn't quite read. Pain, maybe. Loss still too fresh to have scarred over properly. Then he smiled, bright and practiced, the way children learned to smile when they didn't want adults to worry. "She was the smartest person I ever knew. Come on, the coffee's this way." The office smelled like motor oil and old paper. A calendar on the wall still showed September. Someone had forgotten to flip it. More drawings everywhere, evidence of a father who displayed every piece his son created, even the ones that weren't quite there yet. Sarah studied the family portrait more closely. "Did you do all these?" Jordan nodded. some emotion Sarah couldn't name crossing his young features. Dad puts up everything I make, even the bad ones. This one isn't bad. It's beautiful. That's my family. Before Mom went to heaven. Sarah's throat tightened. Graham's report had said Rachel died 2 years ago, which meant Jordan had been 6. 6 years old, watching cancer slowly devour the person who'd given birth to him, learning about mortality before he'd mastered multiplication tables. I'm sorry. That must be hard. It's okay. She's still with us. Just different now. He pointed to another drawing, this one showing a man and boy working on a car together, their heads bent over an open hood in perfect synchronization. That's Dad and me. He's teaching me about engines. Says every person should know how to fix things. He's right. Do you know how to fix things? Sarah thought about her life, the broken relationships she'd walked away from instead of repairing, the hollow victories that had left her emptier than defeats, the empire built on acquisition instead of creation, the decades spent accumulating wealth without ever building anything that truly mattered. No, I don't think I do. Jordan considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. Maybe Dad can teach you too. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway, grease still streaking his forearms despite obvious attempts to clean up. Found your problem. Brake pads were more worn than I thought. Replace them with good quality parts, not the cheap stuff. Total $73. That work for you? $73. Sarah spent more than that on lunch. But she pulled out carefully counted bills from her wallet, bills she'd withdrawn specifically for this purpose, practicing the transaction like a theater performance, and handed them over. Marcus counted it, nodded, disappeared to his cash register, returned with $7 in change. Sarah's fingers moved before her brain caught up, trying to wave away the money. Keep it. For Jordan's art supplies. He's very talented. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. Not anger exactly, something more complex. Wariness, maybe. The look of someone who'd learned to be careful about gifts that came without clear strings. I appreciate the thought, but we don't take charity. He pressed the $7 back into her palm. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. First mistake. In Marcus Wright's world, money created obligations. Even $7 carried weight. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. No offense taken. Just how I operate. She nodded, understanding clicking into place. This was a man who'd rather struggle than owe, who saw accepting unearned money as surrendering some essential part of himself, who'd built his self-worth on the foundation of fair exchange instead of accumulated advantage. Sarah pocketed the $7 and headed for the Civic. At the garage door, impulse made her turn back. Jordan? The boy looked up from his sketchbook, pencil pausing mid-stroke. Keep drawing. You're going to be great someday. His smile could have powered Riverside streetlights for a week. Thanks, Miss Sarah. Come back soon. She drove away with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, the wooden pencil in her jacket pocket feeling heavier than it had any right to feel. What was she doing? Playing dress-up in other people's lives, pretending to be someone she wasn't, using a family heirloom as bait for connection she had no right to expect? 2 days later, she came back. The Civic developed a squeak in the front left tire that Sarah had created herself in her apartment parking lot at 2 a.m, loosening a lug nut with a wrench she'd bought specifically for this purpose. The deception was metastasizing, spreading through her life like cancer through Rachel Wright's lungs, and Sarah couldn't seem to stop herself. Marcus diagnosed it in 30 seconds. Loose lug nut, easy fix, no charge. You have to charge me something. Tightening a bolt for free would be robbery. Takes 30 seconds, not worth paperwork. At least let me buy you both lunch. There's a diner down the street. Marcus was already shaking his head when Jordan materialized beside him, eyes bright with hope that made Sarah's chest ache. Can we, Dad? Please? You never take breaks.
Miss Sarah's nice.
Jordan.
Mom would have wanted you to take breaks. She said you work too hard.
Low blow. Sarah watched it land like a punch to Marcus's solar plexus. His jaw tightened, but his resistance crumbled like sand under waves. Fine. One lunch. But I'm paying for myself.
Deal.
Riverside Diner occupied a corner on Main Street, all red vinyl booths and laminated menus sticky with decades of use. A waitress who called everyone honey and sweetheart without a trace of irony. Coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Clinton administration. Sarah ordered a burger she didn't want. Marcus ordered the same. Jordan got chicken fingers and proceeded to conduct what appeared to be serious scientific experiments involving 4 different sauces. Marcus studied Sarah across the booth with the same focused attention he'd given her brake pads. So, what brings you to Riverside? The question she'd prepared for, the lie she'd practiced until it felt smooth as river stones. I told you, just passing through. For 2 days now. That's a long pass-through.
I like it here. It's peaceful.
Where are you from originally? Sarah's pulse kicked up. Careful now. Stay close to truth.
New York City.
Marcus nodded slowly, processing. Long way from home.
That's sort of the point.
Running from something? The directness caught her off guard. No social niceties, no polite circumlocution, just straight to the uncomfortable question.
Not running. Looking.
For what? Sarah took a sip of coffee, better than the garage brew but still objectively terrible, buying time to craft an answer that wasn't quite a lie.
I'm not sure yet. Something real, maybe.
Marcus's eyes held hers for a long moment. Sarah felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Not as a name or a net worth or a useful connection. Just as a person. Flawed, searching, uncertain. Trying to figure out who she was underneath all the armor she'd spent 2 decades building. Real's harder to find than people think. I'm beginning to understand that. Jordan interrupted by holding up his latest creation, a surprisingly detailed sketch of their waitress, complete with her beehive hairdo and cat-eye glasses rendered in ketchup and mustard. What do you think? Sarah studied the drawing, genuinely impressed despite herself. That's incredible. You captured her perfectly. Jordan beamed. Dad says I have Mom's eye. Marcus's face softened in that way it always did when Jordan mentioned Rachel. Like someone had turned down the volume on whatever pain he usually carried and replaced it with bittersweet memory. What does that mean? It means I see things other people miss. Mom could do that too. She could look at something ordinary and find the beautiful parts nobody else noticed. Sarah glanced at Marcus, found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decode. She sounds like an amazing woman. She was. The word hung between them. Was. Past tense. A life reduced to memories and a wooden pencil Sarah had stolen without meaning to. Over the next 4 weeks, Sarah manufactured reasons to return. A serpentine belt that squeaked because she'd loosened it following a YouTube tutorial. An oil leak she'd created with carefully applied wrench work. A tire alignment that didn't need aligning. Each problem real enough to justify the visit. Each one deliberately created to extend the deception. Eleanor Murphy noticed by week 2. The elderly widow lived next door to Marcus's house on Maple Street. 71 years old, sharp as broken glass, with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She'd been Rachel's best friend, Graham's dossier had said. Brought casseroles twice a week. Treated Jordan like a grandson. Knew everything about everyone in Riverside. Sarah encountered her on a Thursday afternoon, arriving for a tire rotation Marcus hadn't suggested, but Sarah had insisted on. Eleanor stood on her porch, tending geraniums in window boxes, and her gaze tracked Sarah's Civic like a hawk watching field mice. You're here a lot? Not a question, An observation. Sarah's heart rate kicked up, but she kept her expression neutral. Car's been giving me trouble. Must be a lemon. Just unlucky, I guess. Eleanor studied her with the kind of attention that made Sarah feel like a museum piece being authenticated. Then she smiled, but the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. Or maybe you're looking for something other than car repairs. Sarah's throat went dry. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, honey. Eleanor's voice stayed friendly, but something sharp lived underneath. Just be careful with that man's heart. It's been broken enough already. She turned back to her geraniums, conversation apparently over. Sarah sat in the Civic for 5 full minutes before her hands stopped shaking. Eleanor knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to be watching, enough to be protective, enough to issue warnings wrapped in grandmotherly concern. Week 3 brought the pencil decision. Sarah couldn't keep pretending while holding their family heirloom. The weight of it had become unbearable, a physical manifestation of her deception pressing against her ribs every time she walked into Right Auto Repair. She wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, rehearsed her explanation, drove to Riverside with her confession half-formed on her tongue. Jordan was drawing when she arrived. Marcus was underneath a Dodge Charger, only his legs visible. Sarah's hands trembled and she pulled the package from her jacket. Jordan, I found this. Heard from locals about the accident your dad was involved in. I wanted to return it. The boy's eyes widened as he unwrapped the tissue. His whole body went still, then started shaking. When he looked up, tears streaked his cheeks. This is Mom's pencil. Marcus rolled out from under the Charger fast enough that the creeper nearly shot out from under him. Grease smeared his face, but his attention locked completely on the wooden pencil in his son's hands. Where did you find that? Sarah's rehearsed lie tasted like ashes. I stopped by the accident site. Someone in the diner mentioned it. I looked around, found it in the grass. Marcus stood, crossed the garage in 3 strides, took the pencil from Jordan with hands that shook despite their calluses, turned it over slowly, like he was greeting an old friend he'd thought lost forever. The initials R.W. carved in the wood caught afternoon light. You went back to an accident scene. For strangers. Not a question. Something closer to wonder. It clearly meant something. Marcus looked at her then. Really looked. And Sarah felt something shift behind his carefully maintained walls. The slightest crack in the fortress he'd built around himself and his son. The beginning of trust she absolutely didn't deserve. Thank you. His voice came out rough. Jordan's been grieving this pencil for weeks. You have no idea what this means. Jordan launched himself at Sarah in a hug that knocked the breath from her lungs. 8 years old and already strong, already fierce, already carrying too much loss for someone who should still believe the world was fundamentally kind. Thank you, thank you, thank you! Sarah's arms came up automatically, holding him, and the guilt nearly crushed her. She was using his dead mother's treasured possession as a key to unlock his father's trust. She was manufacturing intimacy through calculated returns. She was everything wrong with the world, wrapped in Goodwill clothes and Target makeup, pretending to be someone worth knowing. That night, alone in her rented apartment, Sarah wrote a confession letter. Every word of truth she'd been hiding, who she really was, why she'd come to Riverside, what the pencil had meant, what she wanted, what she feared. She sealed it in an envelope, addressed it to Marcus, planned to deliver it the next day, and accept whatever consequences came. But the next day brought Sunday dinner at Eleanor Murphy's house. Eleanor had cornered Sarah at the grocery store, invited her with the kind of insistence that made refusal impossible. Just the 4 of them, nothing fancy, homemade pot roast and mashed potatoes, and the crushing weight of pretending to be someone she wasn't, while sitting at a table that felt more like family than anything Sarah had experienced in 22 years. Jordan showed her his newest drawings, all done with Rachel's pencil. the lines somehow more confident now that he had his mother's tool back. Marcus told stories about Rachel with the ease of someone who'd learned to talk about grief without being consumed by it. How she'd drawn pictures on his back in chemistry class. How she'd waited by the phone for 2 hours after giving him her number. How she'd known exactly what she wanted and gone after it without apology. Sarah shared fragments of truth between the lies. Her parents dying when she was 19, the plane crash that had taken them both in an instant, the walls she'd built afterward, the inability to trust, the 22 years of isolation disguised as success. Marcus listened without judgment. "I'm sorry. Losing people that young, it changes you." "It does. Makes you scared of caring too much. Because if you don't care, it can't hurt you when they leave." "But if you don't care, you're not really living either. You're just existing." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. He'd articulated what she'd spent 2 decades refusing to acknowledge. She'd survived her parents' deaths by refusing to risk that kind of loss again, built an empire to insulate herself from vulnerability, surrounded herself with transactional relationships where no one could get close enough to hurt her. And it had worked. She was safe, protected, invulnerable. She was also completely alone. After dinner, after Jordan fell asleep on Eleanor's couch and Marcus carried him home, after dishes were washed and put away, Eleanor cornered Sarah in the kitchen. "I know who you are." Sarah's world tilted. "What?" "Elizabeth Crawford, CEO, Billionaire. I recognized you the second time you came to town, Googled you, found your picture on Forbes." The confession letter in Sarah's jacket pocket might as well have been made of lead. "And you didn't tell Marcus?" "I wanted to see if you were real." Eleanor's eyes held no warmth now, just assessment, judgment, the kind of scrutiny that came from loving someone and refusing to let them be hurt again. "Are you real? Or are you playing dress-up in our lives because you're bored?" Sarah couldn't lie. Not to Eleanor. Not while sitting in a kitchen that smelled like pot roast and home and everything Sarah had spent her entire life trying to buy. "I don't know how to be real. I've spent 22 years being who people expect me to be. The brilliant CEO, the savvy collector, the woman with all the answers. I don't know who I am underneath all that." "Then learn. But learn without lying. Because Marcus Wright has been lied to enough by life. By cancer taking his wife. By promises that couldn't be kept. By a world that takes more than it gives. He doesn't need more lies from you." "I know. I was going to tell him tomorrow. I have a letter." "Don't tell him with a letter. Tell him face to face." Give him the respect of honesty delivered directly, instead of cowardice wrapped in paper. Eleanor's hand landed on Sarah's shoulder. Not gentle, firm. The grip of someone who'd lived through enough to know what mattered. "That man deserves better than what you're giving him. Either be real with him or walk away. But don't keep playing this game. It'll destroy him when the truth comes out. And it always comes out." Sarah drove home with Eleanor's words ringing in her ears and the confession letter burning against her ribs. Tomorrow. She'd tell Marcus tomorrow, face to face, give him the truth and accept whatever came after. But tomorrow brought different truths than the one Sarah had planned. Week 6, day 43. Sarah was helping Jordan with a perspective drawing, showing him how to create depth using vanishing points, when her phone rang. The ringtone cut through the garage like a scream. The Vivaldi's Four Seasons, the kind of pretentious classical choice that announced wealth and privilege to anyone within earshot. Marcus glanced up from the engine he was rebuilding, one eyebrow raised. "Nice ringtone." Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten to change it. 6 weeks of careful preparation, and she'd kept the ringtone that screamed everything she was trying to hide. Old habit, from my consulting days. She stepped outside to take the call, not seeing Marcus approach with 2 mugs of terrible coffee, not realizing he was close enough to hear when Thomas Bradford's voice came through the speaker. Elizabeth, I don't care what the board wants. Push the Berkshire acquisition to January and tell Stevens his quarterly report is unacceptable. I expect revisions by Friday. The words came out in her CEO voice, the voice she used to give orders and expect immediate compliance, the voice that had built a $3 billion empire on the foundation of her parents' deaths, the voice that belonged to Elizabeth Crawford, not Sarah Bennett. She turned and saw Marcus standing 20 feet away, frozen, both coffee mugs in his hands, and something like comprehension dawning across his features. I have to go. She hung up. Silence stretched between them like a chasm opening up in the earth. Marcus set down the coffee mugs with deliberate care. When he spoke, his voice came out flat, dead, the tone of someone who just had their worst suspicions confirmed. Art consultant. Not a question, an accusation wrapped in 2 words. Sarah opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. What could she say? The truth was about to demolish everything she'd built, and she deserved every bit of destruction heading her way. Marcus, I can explain. Can you? Because that didn't sound like any art consultant I've ever heard of. Berkshire Acquisitions, quarterly reports, that sounded like someone running a company. He stepped closer, and Sarah saw something she'd never seen in his face before. Hurt. The kind that came from trusting someone and having that trust used as a weapon. Who are you? Before Sarah could answer, before she could try to salvage anything from the wreckage of her deception, a black Lincoln town car pulled into the gravel lot. Graham Pierce emerged in a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 6 months, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed Manhattan money. Mr. Wright? Graham Pierce, private investigator. He produced a business card with the smooth efficiency of someone who delivered bad news professionally for years. Marcus took it automatically, his attention still mostly on Sarah, confusion warring with anger across his features. I'm looking for someone who's been missing for several months. I believe you may know her. Graham opened his briefcase, withdrew an 8x10 photograph, handed it to Marcus. Sarah watched Marcus's face drain of all color as he stared at the image. Her, Elizabeth Crawford, at the Metropolitan Museum Gala 3 months ago, wearing a Valentino gown that cost $40,000, standing next to a Picasso worth $18 million, smiling for cameras with the practiced ease of someone used to being photographed. The caption along the bottom read, Elizabeth Crawford, CEO Crawford Art Holdings, net worth $3.1 billion. Marcus couldn't speak. His mouth opened but nothing came out. He looked from the photograph to Sarah and back again, like his brain was refusing to process what his eyes were showing him. Graham continued in the tone of someone delivering a prepared statement. Miss Crawford disappeared 2 months ago following a car accident on Route 29, Pennsylvania. A Good Samaritan pulled her from the vehicle and left before paramedics could get his name. Based on the location and timeline, I believe that Good Samaritan was you, Mr. Wright. Marcus's eyes finally found Sarah's. The hurt in them made her want to disappear, to cease existing, to undo every choice that had brought her to this moment. Victoria Hayes became obsessed with finding her rescuer. When I located you, she made an unusual choice. She came here herself, under an assumed identity. Sarah Bennett. Graham's voice carried no judgment, just facts. Cold, clinical, the truth stripped of all context or nuance. The board of Crawford Art Holdings has voted. If Miss Crawford doesn't return to New York within 72 hours, they're declaring her mentally unfit and seizing operational control of the company. He handed Marcus a second business card. I thought you deserved to know the truth, Mr. Wright. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Graham returned to his Lincoln and drove away, leaving Sarah and Marcus standing in the gravel lot with the truth scattered between them like broken glass. Marcus looked at the photograph in his hands. Back to Sarah. The photograph. Sarah. Like he was trying to reconcile two different people who couldn't possibly be the same individual. $3 billion. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Sarah's throat closed up. She tried to form words, but grief stole her ability to speak. Marcus, please. Please what? Please understand why you lied to us for 6 weeks? Please accept that you pretended to be someone you're not? Please forgive you for making my son think you were his friend when this was all just some kind of game? It wasn't a game. I never meant. Then what was it? The words came out louder now, frustration and betrayal giving them volume. Movement from inside the garage. Jordan appeared in the doorway, drawn by his father's raised voice. Dad? Why are you yelling? The boy saw Sarah crying, saw Graham's town car disappearing down the street, saw his father holding a photograph of someone who looked like Miss Sarah, but couldn't possibly be Miss Sarah because Miss Sarah wore Goodwill clothes and drove a Honda Civic and worried about $70 brake jobs. Is Miss Sarah really a billionaire? Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, they held nothing but exhaustion. Yes, son, she is. Jordan turned to Sarah, and the betrayal in his 8-year-old face destroyed what remained of her composure. Why didn't you tell us? Sarah knelt down, putting herself at eye level with him, tears streaming freely now. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew who I really was, you'd only see the money. You'd treat me differently. And I needed to know if people could like me for who I am, instead of what I have. I wouldn't have cared about the money. I know that now. But I didn't know it then. And that's my fault. That's all my fault. Jordan's voice cracked, the sound of a child trying to be brave and failing. Mom always said the worst lies are the ones we tell people we love, because those hurt the most. The words hit Sarah like a bullet. She reached for Jordan, but Marcus was already there, pulling his son back, putting his body between his child and the woman who'd spent 6 weeks earning their trust through calculated deception. You should go. Marcus's voice held finality. The door slamming shut. The bridge burning. Everything Sarah had built reduced to ash. Marcus, I understand you're angry, but if you'll just let me explain. No! The word echoed across the garage, across the lot, across whatever remained of their connection. Eleanor Murphy's porch light came on next door. Other neighbors started emerging, drawn by raised voices in a town where raised voices meant something worth witnessing. We were fine before you came here. We'll be fine after you leave. We don't need your money, your pity, or whatever twisted entertainment our lives provided. Just go. Sarah stood, legs shaking, the world tilting under her feet. She'd known this moment was coming, had prepared for it, planned for it, accepted it as inevitable. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it viscerally were different universes. She pulled the confession letter from her jacket, set it on the workbench, turned to leave. The pencil. Her voice came out barely audible. I'm glad Jordan has it back. I never meant to keep it. I needed a reason, an excuse, some justification for showing up in your lives with questions I had no right to ask. Marcus picked up the wooden pencil from where Jordan had left it, stared at it like he was seeing it for the first time. You had Rachel's pencil this whole time? For weeks? While Jordan grieved it? While he drew with cheap replacements because his mother's tool was gone? I know how terrible. Get out! The words hit like physical blows. Sarah ran for the Civic, vision blurred by tears, hands fumbling with keys. The engine started. She drove away from Wright Auto Repair, from Riverside, from the only genuine connection she'd felt in 22 years. And she didn't look back, because looking back would make it real, would cement the fact that she'd destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to her through her own fear and dishonesty. In her rearview mirror, Marcus sank onto the porch steps, holding Rachel's pencil in both hands like it was the only solid thing left in a world that had just betrayed him again. Beth's Manhattan penthouse felt like a mausoleum when she returned. 22 floors above street level, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, walls covered with paintings worth $800 million collectively. Rothko, Monet, Picasso. Masterpieces she'd acquired not because she loved them, but because they represented sound investments, appreciating assets, proof that money could buy anything except the one thing she'd driven to Riverside searching for. She stood in the center of her living room at 3 a.m, surrounded by other people's visions, and realized she'd never had a vision of her own, never created anything, never built something that mattered, just accumulated, collected, purchased proof of sophistication while her actual self withered into irrelevance. Catherine Walsh found her there 6 hours later, still standing in the same spot, still wearing the Goodwill jeans and Target sweater that had been her costume for 6 weeks of lies. "So you're back." Beth didn't turn around. Couldn't. If she looked at Catherine, saw sympathy or disappointment or judgment in the older woman's face, she'd shatter completely. "I destroyed it. The only real thing I've ever had. I destroyed it." Catherine's footsteps crossed the hardwood, stopped beside Beth. They stood together in silence, two women staring at paintings worth more than small nations, while the city woke up outside. "What are you going to do about it?" The question landed like a challenge. Beth finally turned, found Catherine's expression neutral, waiting. "There's nothing I can do. He told me not to come back." "And you're going to listen? The woman who built a $3 billion empire from her parents' insurance payout is giving up? This isn't business. I can't buy my way out of this one." Catherine's laugh held no humor. "Then earn your way back, the same way you earned his trust the first time, by showing up, by being present, by proving through action instead of words that you've changed." "He doesn't want me there. Maybe not today, but people change, hearts soften. And that man loved you, Elizabeth. I saw it in your face when you talked about him. Don't tell me he didn't feel the same." Beth sank onto her couch, head in her hands, the weight of everything crushing down. "I used his dead wife's pencil as bait. I lied about who I was for 6 weeks. I made his son think I cared when I was just playing a role. How do you come back from that?" You don't come back from it. You can only move forward through it. With honesty this time, with vulnerability, with the willingness to accept whatever consequences come. Catherine sat beside her, took Beth's hand in both of hers. "Your parents would have wanted you to be happy. Actually happy, not just successful. They didn't die so you could spend 22 years building walls around your heart. They died in a plane crash, terrible, tragic. But that tragedy doesn't give you permission to stop living." The words found cracks in Beth's armor. Tears came, finally, after 6 weeks of holding them back. She wept for her parents, for Rachel Wright, for Marcus and Jordan, for the woman she'd been and the woman she'd failed to become. Catherine held her through it, the way mothers were supposed to hold daughters, the way Beth's actual mother would have if a Gulfstream engine hadn't failed over the Atlantic. When the tears finally stopped, Catherine's voice came gentle but firm. "Now, what are you going to do?" Beth looked up, face blotchy, eyes red, stripped of every defense she'd ever constructed. "I'm going to wait. Give him space.
Let the anger cool. And then I'm going to try again. Not with lies this time. With truth. Even if the truth is I don't know how to be real yet, but I'm trying to learn. Good. That's good. Now go shower. You smell like defeat and bad coffee.
Beth almost laughed. Would have, if her chest didn't feel like someone had carved out her heart with a dull spoon. Marcus Wright packed his truck at dawn, moving with mechanical efficiency born from years of loading engines and transmissions and auto parts that weighed more than furniture. Jordan watched from the porch steps, sketchbook abandoned beside him, Rachel's pencil clutched in one small fist.
Where are we going?
Marcus didn't look at his son. Couldn't. If he saw the confusion in Jordan's face, saw the hurt, he'd lose his resolve. Somewhere new. Fresh start.
Because of Miss Sarah?
The name made Marcus's jaw clench. Not Sarah. Elizabeth. Beth. A billionaire playing dress-up, treating their lives like entertainment, making them extras in whatever story she was telling herself about finding authenticity. Partly. We just need to get away for a while. Jordan climbed into the passenger seat without argument, bringing only his backpack and the art supplies Beth had given him for his birthday 3 weeks ago. Marcus had wanted to throw them out, every pencil and sketch pad and set of watercolors she'd purchased, but the look on Jordan's face when he'd suggested it had stopped him cold. The boy had lost enough. Marcus wouldn't take away his tools for processing grief just because the giver had turned out to be a liar. Eleanor Murphy appeared on her porch as Marcus loaded the last box, her 71-year-old face lined with concern and something that looked like anger.
Marcus Wright, you're making a mistake.
I'm protecting my son.
From what? From love? From second chances? From the possibility that someone might actually give a damn about you both?
From being hurt again. We've had enough hurt, Eleanor.
That woman loves you. I've seen it. Talk to her. She made mistakes, big ones. But love isn't negated by mistakes.
Love is tested by them. Marcus climbed into the truck, started the engine. Eleanor descended her porch steps, crossed to his window.
Rachel would have given her another chance.
The words hit like buckshot. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles went white. Rachel's not here to give chances. I'm the one who has to make these decisions now. And I'm deciding we need distance.
Then you're deciding wrong.
But Marcus was already pulling away, gravel crunching under tires, leaving Riverside in his rearview mirror the same way he'd left so many other things, schools, friends, the house where Maya had died. Running wasn't new. Running was familiar. Running meant control over at least one variable in a universe that kept taking things from him. 3 hours into the drive, Jordan spoke for the first time since they'd left.
I need to use the bathroom.
Marcus pulled into a gas station just across the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, jumped fuel while Jordan disappeared inside. The boy returned 5 minutes later, carrying something that made Marcus's breath catch. A postcard. Watercolor painting of a woman standing in a garden, surrounded by flowers rendered in shades that shifted from coral to amber to deep crimson. Beautiful. Professional. The kind of work that belonged in galleries, not gas station souvenir racks. Jordan turned it over, showed Marcus the back. Handwriting filled the message space in careful script. Some things get lost so they can be found by people who need them more. R.P. Rachel's initials. Rachel Porter Wright's initials, written in handwriting that looked nothing like Rachel's actual handwriting, but somehow felt right anyway, felt intentional, felt like a message from beyond whatever veil separated the living from the dead. Where did you get that?
Postcard rack inside, right up front. It already had the writing on it.
Marcus took the postcard, examined it closely. Store-bought. Mass-produced print, not an original. But the message on the back was handwritten, personal, meant for someone even if that someone wasn't supposed to be him. Did you see who put it there? No one was near the rack, just sitting there, waiting. Marcus looked around the gas station, empty except for a teenage clerk scrolling through his phone behind bulletproof glass. No other customers, no one who could have planted this postcard specifically for them to find. Coincidence. Had to be. The universe wasn't sending messages through convenience store merchandise. Dead wives didn't communicate via watercolor prints and cryptic notes. Rachel was gone, had been gone for 2 years and 3 months, and grief was making him see patterns where only randomness existed. Except Rachel had always said coincidences were just God's way of staying anonymous. Jordan climbed back into the truck, still holding the postcard. Dad, do you think Mom wants you to be happy? The question sat between them like a third passenger. Marcus stared at the steering wheel, at his hands still grease-stained despite scrubbing, at the wedding ring he'd never taken off, even though the woman who'd given it to him existed only in memory now. I think your mother wants me to take care of you. That's what matters. But what if taking care of me means letting yourself be happy too? What if I need you to be happy so I can learn how? 8 years old. When had his son gotten so wise? When had grief aged him into someone who understood things Marcus still couldn't grasp? I don't know how to answer that, son. That's okay. I don't think you're supposed to know yet. Marcus started the truck and drove north toward Millbrook, Pennsylvania, carrying a postcard that might mean everything or nothing, accompanied by a child who saw too clearly and a ghost who refused to stay buried. Millbrook appeared through autumn rain 3 hours later. Population 8,000. Big enough for anonymity, small enough to find work. Marcus rented an apartment above a deli on Main Street, 2 bedrooms, month-to-month lease, asking no questions and offering no history. Found employment at Johnson's garage within a day. Experienced mechanics were always in demand. Enrolled Jordan at Riverside Elementary. Signed forms, provided vaccination records, became another single father in another small town, trying to outrun whatever he'd left behind. 3 months passed. October became November, became December. Jordan started 3rd grade, made a few friends, drew less frequently but with more precision when he did. The colors in his sketches shifted darker, grays and blues replacing the vibrant palettes he'd used in Riverside when Beth had still been Sarah and lies had felt like connection. Marcus worked, rebuilt carburetors, replaced transmissions, fixed what was broken, and charged fair prices, and went home alone every night to an apartment that never quite felt like home. He didn't date, didn't socialize, didn't do anything except work and parent and try not to think about a woman with lies in her mouth and truth in her eyes. Eleanor called once a week. Updates about Riverside, who'd moved, who'd married, whose grandchildren were visiting. She never mentioned Beth, never asked if Marcus regretted leaving, just maintained the connection like a lifeline stretched across 100 miles of Pennsylvania highway. On a Tuesday in early December, 3 months and 4 days after they'd fled Riverside, Jordan collapsed during art class. The teacher said later he'd been painting, watercolors, using the supplies Beth had given him, working on a landscape that showed remarkable sophistication for 8 years old. Then his hand had frozen mid-stroke. The brush clattered to the floor. Jordan made a sound like someone had punched him, clutched his chest, and went down hard. Marcus got the call at Johnson's garage, hands deep in an engine block, and the world stopped making sense. Mr. Wright, this is Millbrook Elementary. Your son has collapsed. An ambulance is on the way to Millbrook Medical Center. You need to come now. He ran, left tools scattered, left the engine half disassembled, left everything because nothing mattered except getting to Jordan,
getting to his son, the one piece of Rachel still alive in this world, the only reason Marcus kept breathing. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Marcus paced, unable to sit, unable to think, unable to do anything except replay the phone call in his mind. Collapsed. Ambulance. Come now. Words that meant emergency, crisis, the possibility that he might lose the last person he loved. Dr. Rebecca Stone appeared after 45 minutes that felt like 45 years.
45 years old, steady hands, kind eyes that had delivered bad news before and knew how to package it with maximum clarity and minimum cruelty. Mr. Wright, Jordan has a congenital heart defect, ventricular septal defect, a hole in the wall between the lower chambers of his heart. Marcus's legs stopped working. He sat down hard in the plastic chair that creaked under the sudden weight. How did we not know? These defects can be subtle. Sometimes the murmur is soft enough to miss in routine checkups. You mentioned his mother died of cancer? Lung cancer. She was in remission when she got pregnant. The cancer came back when Jordan was 2. Dr. Stone nodded slowly, pieces clicking together. The treatments she received may have affected fetal development. We see this sometimes with aggressive chemotherapy regimens. The defect was likely present from birth but dormant. Stress or physical exertion can activate it. Is he going to... Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't give voice to the question eating him alive. He needs surgery, soon. Within the next 10 days, ideally. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of complications. 10 days. Marcus's mind immediately jumped to the next question. The question that always came. The question that had defined his entire existence since Rachel's diagnosis. How much? Dr. Stone's expression shifted. That look. The look people gave you when the answer was going to hurt worse than the disease. The surgery itself, plus hospital stay and follow-up care, you're looking at approximately $185,000 total. Your insurance will cover maybe 60%. Out of pocket, you'd be responsible for $70,000 to $80,000. $80,000. Marcus made $41,000 a year. He had maybe $700 in savings. The house in Riverside had a mortgage he was still paying. He couldn't borrow that kind of money. Couldn't pull it from thin air. Couldn't manifest it through willpower or desperation or prayer. His son needed surgery to live, and Marcus couldn't afford to save him. Are there payment plans? Financial assistance programs? We'll work with you to find solutions. But Mr. Wright, the timeline is critical. We can't delay the surgery while we arrange financing. Marcus put his head in his hands. For the first time since Rachel died, actually died instead of just being sick, he broke down completely. Shoulders shaking, breath coming in gasps, the kind of crying that came from deaths he didn't know he possessed. He'd failed. Failed Rachel's first request. Take care of Jordan. Give him everything he needs. Failed at the one job that mattered more than any other. His son was going to die because Marcus couldn't pull $80,000 out of his bank account. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. I know about Jordan. I'm on a plane. Don't shut me out. E. Marcus stared at the screen until the words blurred. E. Elizabeth. Beth. The woman he'd driven away in fury and righteousness and wounded pride. She knew. Somehow she knew. Which meant she'd been watching, tracking, keeping tabs on them even after he'd told her to stay away. He should feel violated, stalked, angry that she couldn't respect his boundaries. Instead, he felt something worse. Hope. The possibility that maybe Jordan wouldn't die because the one person with resources to save him was already in motion. His fingers moved before his brain caught up. Millbrook Medical Center, room 347. The reply came instantly.
90 minutes. Marcus set down the phone, stood, walked to Jordan's room where his son lay sleeping, hooked to machines that beeped rhythms Marcus didn't understand but feared anyway, sat in the chair beside the bed, took Jordan's small hand in his larger, calloused one. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry I can't fix this one on my own.
Jordan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, heavy with sedatives.
Dad?
I'm here, son. Right here.
What happened?
Your heart needs some work. The doctors are going to fix it. You're going to be fine. The lie tasted like ash, but Marcus kept his voice steady. Jordan needed reassurance, not panic. Needed his father to be strong even when strength was a performance built on terror.
Am I going to die?
The question destroyed what remained of Marcus's composure. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead against Jordan's, the way Rachel used to when Jordan had nightmares. No, absolutely not. I won't let that happen. I promise you. Another lie. Another promise he might not be able to keep. But what else could he say? Jordan was 8. 8 years old and asking if he was going to die, and Marcus had to give him something to hold on to besides fear. Beth arrived exactly 90 minutes later. Marcus saw her appear in the doorway. No designer suit, no careful styling, just jeans and an NYU sweatshirt, and hair pulled back in a ponytail that had given up trying to look intentional. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged, the careful facade she'd worn in Riverside completely absent. How is he? Marcus stood, putting himself between Beth and Jordan's sleeping form. Old instincts, protective barriers. The same walls he'd built after Rachel died, reinforced after Beth's deception, standing strong despite the cracks her arrival had just put in them. Stable, needs surgery, $185,000. Beth's jaw tightened. It's handled. I can't accept. Your pride doesn't get to decide whether your son lives or dies. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but Beth stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, the same drugstore brand she'd used in Riverside, and suddenly the anger felt less important than the fact that she'd come. Marcus, listen to me. A child is in that bed with a hole in his heart. I have resources to fix it. Are you really going to tell me no because you can't get past your anger at me? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Fair would be Jordan having a healthy heart. Fair would be Rachel still being alive to make this decision. Fair would be you having the money to save your son without needing help from anyone. But we don't get fair. We get what is. And what is right now is that I can pay for this surgery and you can't. So stop arguing and let me help. Marcus stared at her, really looked, saw exhaustion in her face, fear, desperation, the same emotions he was feeling reflected back at him from someone who had no obligation to care, but clearly did anyway. What do you want in return? Beth's laugh came out harsh and broken. Nothing. God, Marcus, I don't want anything except to know that Jordan gets to grow up, that he gets to become the artist he's supposed to be, that he gets to live. Nobody does something like this for nothing. Then I'm nobody, because I'm not asking for anything except the knowledge that I didn't fail the 2 people who showed me what family actually feels like. Her voice broke on the last word. Tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks, and Marcus saw something he'd missed during their 6 weeks in Riverside. Genuine emotion. Real vulnerability. The mask stripped away completely, leaving only a woman who'd made terrible mistakes and was trying desperately to make amends. There are conditions. Beth nodded, swiping at her face with the back of her hand. Anything.
Name them.
Money is for Jordan only, nothing for me. You don't get to buy your way back into our lives. Whatever relationship we have, if we have one, starts from scratch. No shortcuts based on this. And no more lies, ever, about anything. If you can't be honest with me, I need to know right now. Beth met his eyes, held his gaze without flinching.
I will never lie to you again. I swear it on everything I have, everything I've ever wanted, everything I hope to become. No more lies, no more games, just truth. Even when the truth is ugly or inconvenient or makes me look weak.
Marcus searched her face for the deception, for the calculation, for any sign that this was another performance, another role she was playing to get what she wanted. Found only exhaustion and fear, and something that looked dangerously close to love. Okay, we'll accept your help for Jordan's surgery. And after that, he paused, the words catching in his throat. After that, we'll see. Beth's whole body seemed to sag with relief. She reached for the chair beside Jordan's bed, sat down carefully, like approaching a skittish animal that might bolt.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to do something right.
Don't thank me. Thank Jordan when he wakes up. He's the one you hurt most. The words landed like they were supposed to. Beth flinched, but didn't argue. Just nodded, accepting the truth of her own damage. Dr. Rebecca Stone arrived the next morning, accompanied by another woman Marcus didn't recognize. Younger, maybe 35, with the efficient competence of someone used to high-stakes medicine.
Mr. Wright, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She's a pediatric cardiac surgeon I brought in from Philadelphia, one of the best in her field. Beth had done this, made calls, pulled strings, used her money and connections to bring in specialists who wouldn't normally work in a small-town hospital. Marcus should probably feel grateful.
Instead, he just felt tired. Dr. Mitchell explained the procedure to Jordan in terms an 8-year-old could understand, using her hands to demonstrate how they'd patch the hole, how his heart would work better afterward, how he'd be able to run and play without getting tired. Jordan listened with the serious attention he brought to everything important.
Will I still be able to draw?
Dr. Mitchell smiled, genuine warmth breaking through clinical efficiency. Absolutely. In fact, I collect art from my bravest patients. Maybe you'll make something for me after your surgery? Jordan's face lit up despite the fear Marcus could see swimming beneath the surface.
Really? You'd want one of my drawings?
I'd be honored to have one. After the doctors left, Jordan looked at his father with eyes too old for his face.
Dad, is Miss Beth here?
Marcus hesitated. They hadn't discussed this, whether Beth would be allowed to see Jordan, whether the damage she'd done could be repaired, or if it was permanent. Yeah, she's here.
Can I see her?
You want to? Jordan nodded, fingers twisting in his hospital blanket.
I think so. Yeah.
Marcus stepped into the hallway where Beth had been waiting, giving them space, respecting boundaries that Marcus hadn't explicitly set, but that she'd somehow intuited anyway. He wants to talk to you. Beth stood immediately, hands smoothing down her jeans in a nervous gesture Marcus recognized from Riverside, when she'd been pretending to be Sarah, when every interaction had been calculated to seem authentic while being fundamentally false. Except this nervousness felt real. She entered Jordan's room like she was approaching a confessional, stopped a few feet from the bed, waited for Jordan to speak first.
You came.
Of course I came.
Even though Dad told you to go away.
Even though. Jordan studied her with the same intense focus he brought to his drawings. Why? Beth sat down slowly in the chair beside his bed, at eye level with him. No adult talking down to a child, but two people having a conversation. Because some things are more important than being told to go away. You're one of those things. Dad said you lied about who you were. I did. It was wrong. I hurt both of you. and I'm sorrier than I know how to say." Jordan's voice came out small, fragile, the voice of someone who'd been brave for too long. "Are you really a billionaire?" "Yes." "That's a lot of money." "It is." "Is that why you're helping pay for my surgery? Because you have a lot of money?" Beth's hands twisted in her lap. Marcus watched from the doorway, letting this play out, curious to see if she'd tell the truth or retreat behind comfortable lies. "Partly. Money makes this easier. But I'm helping because I love you, Jordan. Both of you. Money is just a tool. Love is the reason." Jordan absorbed this with the gravity of someone who understood that words and actions didn't always align, that people said things they didn't mean, that the world was full of broken promises. "Are you going to stay this time? Or leave again?" "That depends on your father. And on you. I want to stay. I want to earn back the trust I broke. But I understand if that's not possible." "I don't know yet if I can trust you." Jordan's honesty cut cleaner than any accusation. "I was really sad when you left. I don't want to be that sad again." Beth reached out, stopped herself before touching him, respecting his space. "I understand. I was sad too. Leaving you and your dad was the worst thing I've ever done. Worse than the lying, worse than the pretending. The leaving part broke my heart." "Then why did you do it?" "Because your dad told me to. And he was right to tell me. I'd hurt you both. I deserved to leave." Jordan looked at his father, then back at Beth, weighing something Marcus couldn't quite see. "Okay, you can stay. But you have to promise not to hurt Dad again. He cried when you left. He thought I didn't hear, but I did." Marcus's face flushed hot. Beth's eyes filled with tears that spilled over immediately. "I promise. I promise I'll do everything I can not to hurt either of you ever again. And if I mess up, because people mess up sometimes, I'll own it. I'll apologize. I'll do better. No more running. No more hiding." Jordan reached for her hand. Beth took it carefully, like she was being given something precious and breakable. "Okay then. We can try." The surgery happened 2 days later. 4 hours Marcus spent in the waiting room, pacing, drinking terrible coffee, trying not to imagine every possible catastrophic outcome. Beth sat quietly in a corner, not trying to make conversation, just present. Eleanor arrived mid-morning, having driven the 100 miles from Riverside the moment Marcus called her. "You stubborn fool." She hugged him hard enough to crack ribs. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" "Didn't want to worry you." "Too late. I've been worried since you left." She turned to Beth, sizing her up with the same sharp assessment she'd used in Riverside. "And you, the billionaire." "Yes, ma'am." "You break his heart again? I'll make your life very difficult." Beth nodded. No argument, no defense. "I understand. I deserve that and worse." Eleanor's expression softened fractionally. "But you came when it mattered. That counts for something." Dr. Mitchell appeared after what felt like decades, but the clock insisted was only 4 hours and 17 minutes. He did beautifully. The repair was successful. Heart is already functioning better. He'll need to take it easy for a few weeks, but long-term prognosis is excellent. Marcus's legs gave out. He sat down hard in a plastic chair, head in his hands. Relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning. Beth's hand landed on his shoulder. He didn't shake it off. Jordan spent 3 days in recovery. Drew constantly when he was awake, colors brightening with each passing hour. His sketches shifted from dark grays and blues back toward the vibrant palettes he'd used before everything fell apart. One drawing showed 3 people under a tree, father, son, and a woman with Beth's face. The mother angel was still there, floating above, but now she seemed to be smiling down at the scene instead of haunting it. Jordan titled it, Our Family. 6 months later, Beth stood in Eleanor Murphy's kitchen in Riverside, helping with dishes after Sunday dinner. They'd fallen into a routine. Beth spent 3 days a week in New York, managing Crawford Art Holdings. She'd kept the CEO position, but delegated operations, focusing on strategic vision instead of daily minutia. 4 days a week in Riverside, renting a small house 2 blocks from Marcus's place, building a life that looked nothing like the one she'd left behind. Marcus appeared in the doorway, Jordan already asleep on Eleanor's couch after eating too much pot roast. "Walk with me?" Beth dried her hands, followed him outside. October again, full circle back to the season when everything had started. They walked toward the park where Jordan played, leaves crunching underfoot, the kind of comfortable silence that came from months of rebuilding trust through small, honest moments instead of grand gestures. "I've been thinking." Marcus stopped under a streetlight, turned to face her. "About Rachel. About what she'd want. About second chances." Beth's heart hammered, but she stayed quiet, letting him work through whatever he needed to say. "She made me promise 3 things before she died. Take care of Jordan, don't let grief make me hard, and find love again." He pulled something from his pocket. Not Rachel's wedding ring. Beth knew he still wore that on a chain under his shirt. A different ring. Simple silver band, no stones, the kind of understated elegance that came from choosing based on meaning instead of cost. "I've kept the first promise. Jordan's healthy, happy. You've been good for him. Good for both of us." "Marcus, let me finish." His voice was gentle. "The second promise I've been working on. Opening back up. Letting people in. Learning that walls don't protect you. They just isolate you. You've taught me that. Even when you were lying, even when everything was false, the connection we built was real. I felt it. You felt it. And that scared both of us enough that we sabotaged it." He held up the ring. "The third promise is the hardest. Rachel believed in second chances. She believed people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves. She believed in forgiveness." Beth's vision blurred. "You earned this. Not with money, not with the surgery, though that mattered. You earned it by showing up every single day for 6 months. By being honest, even when honesty was hard. By loving Jordan like he was yours. By being patient with me while I figured out how to trust again." He took her left hand, held the ring at the tip of her finger. "Elizabeth Crawford, will you marry me?" The word came out before Beth could stop it, before she could second guess, before fear could tell her she didn't deserve this. "Yes." They married 3 months later in Eleanor's backyard. Small ceremony, judge presiding, Jordan as ring bearer, grinning so wide his face might split. Eleanor crying. Catherine Walsh flying in from New York to stand as Beth's witness. A handful of Riverside neighbors who'd watched the whole story unfold and invested in its happy ending. Beth wore a simple dress from a local boutique. Nothing designer, nothing that screamed wealth. Marcus wore his good suit, the one he saved for church and funerals. When the judge pronounced them married, Jordan cheered so loud that birds scattered from nearby trees. The reception happened in Eleanor's living room. Pot roast again, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal that had become their tradition. Jordan presented Beth with a painting he'd been working on for months, watercolor, done with Rachel's pencil for the sketch and cheap paints for the color. It showed the moment of rescue on Route 29, but from Beth's perspective. Strong hands reaching in, a calm face promising she'd be okay. The beginning of everything. He'd titled it, "The Woman Who Found Us." Later, after cake and coffee and Eleanor shooing them out with instructions to enjoy their wedding night, Marcus and Beth stood on Eleanor's porch,
watching stars appear in October sky. Do you think Rachel would approve? Marcus was quiet for a long moment.
Then he pulled the chain from under his shirt, showed Beth the wedding ring he still wore alongside hers.
I think she knew I'd find you, or you'd find me, however it worked. She believed in love that way, that it finds you when you need it, not necessarily when you're looking for it. Beth leaned against him, feeling his warmth, his solidity, the reality of a life she'd almost destroyed through fear and dishonesty. I went to Riverside to find a man who wanted nothing from me. I found so much more than that. I found myself, the version of myself worth being. And I found proof that second chances matter, that people can change, that love doesn't always come in the package you expect. They stood there until the stars filled the sky completely, two people who'd found each other through accident and intention, through lies and truth, through loss and hope. Jordan's painting sat on Eleanor's mantel inside, visible through the window.
A reminder that sometimes you had to lose everything to understand what actually mattered. Real strength wasn't the ability to stand alone. It was the wisdom to know when to ask for help, when to forgive, when to try again despite fear. Beth had spent $3 billion learning that lesson. It had cost her everything except the two things that actually mattered. A man who'd taught her what couldn't be bought, and a boy who'd shown her what love actually looked like when stripped of all pretense.